A lawyer is one of those professionals that's a bit like a mechanic in that if you require their services, you probably don't know a lot about the world they work in, and you sort of just have to hope that 1, they know what they're doing, and 2, their interest in getting your problem solved doesn't conflict with some other interest they have, like money. Now, if your mechanic is no good, you might lose some money, but at the end of the day, you can just find another mechanic. If your lawyer is no good, then you might be going to prison. So you really want a good lawyer, one that will fight tooth and nail for you, one that will take a bullet for you. Well, actually that last part might be asking for a bit too much, but that's exactly what the subject of today's video did. Clement Vallandigham literally took a bullet for his client in the courtroom, not to defend him from an assassin, but to prove his innocence. That sounds like the sort of lawyer everyone would want, but there was a little bit more to this guy than being a lawyer. So much so that when you hear his story, you might not want him defending you anymore, and not just because he died over 100 years ago. Clement Vallandigham was born in 1820 in Ohio, USA. Admitted to the bar in 1842, he practiced law quite successfully, but he also had an interest in politics and was elected as a Democrat to the state legislature in 1845. He ran for Congress in 1856 but was narrowly defeated. Like any self-respecting politician, he complained about this and said that votes had been cast illegally by non-residents of his district in Ohio. The Committee of Elections of the House of Representatives heard his appeal and after months of deliberation eventually agreed, and he was elected. He remained in the House of Representatives for a number of years, but found himself in trouble when the American Civil War broke out. You see, the Democratic Vallandigham was staunchly opposed to Republican President Abraham Lincoln. Vallandigham supported slavery and believed the federal government had no power to regulate it, and that it should instead be a matter for each state to decide. He believed that the Confederate States had an implied right to secede from the Union, and that the federal government had no legal right to pursue military action against them. Obviously, Abraham Lincoln disagreed with this, and in the ensuing war, Vallandigham became one of Lincoln's most outspoken detractors, derisively referring to him as King Lincoln and accusing him of turning the United States into one of the worst despotisms on earth. In accordance with these beliefs, Vallandigham opposed every military bill, and he soon developed a reputation as a Confederate sympathizer, becoming a very divisive figure and perhaps one of the most hated men in the North. He lost his bid for a third term in the House of Representatives in 1862, and shortly after, in response to the perceived threat from anti-war agitators, Lincoln suspended habeas corpus and declared martial law in select areas. This allowed for the arrest and detention of individuals suspected of hampering the war effort or being disloyal. In Vallandigham's native Ohio, the commander of the Union forces was General Ambrose Burnside, whose distinct facial hair and last name gave rise to the term sideburns. Not at all relevant to the story, I just thought that was interesting. Burnside made it clear that he would go after anyone with the habit of declaring sympathies for the enemy under the newly declared martial law. This meant Vallandigham should probably keep his mouth shut, but of course he didn't. He gave a big speech that was anti-war and pro-slavery, which was attended by Union Army officers in civilian clothes, and he was arrested and tried by military commission. During his trial, Vallandigham only called one witness, a fellow Democrat and well-known anti-war congressman. Of course, that didn't help his case, and he was sentenced to confinement in a military prison for the continuation of the war. President Lincoln was wary of Vallandigham though. He knew imprisoning Vallandigham would only give him more ammunition to call him a tyrant, as he was fond of doing, and Lincoln didn't want to turn him into a martyr for the anti-government cause. So, Lincoln commuted his sentence. He said, "Oh, you love the Confederates so much? Well, off you go, you're banished, mate." And Vallandigham was transported across enemy lines and into the Confederate States. Apparently, Vallandigham didn't much like this at all, but he couldn't return to the northern states, so instead he went to Canada. In Canada, he declared himself a candidate for the governor of Ohio and won a landslide victory in absentia in 1863. It turned out Lincoln was exactly right. The government's actions against Vallandigham had bolstered support for him, at least in his native Ohio. In 1864, Vallandigham became leader of the Order of the Sons of Liberty, a secret political organization that aimed to form a Northwestern Confederacy out of Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, and Illinois. He disguised himself and travelled back to Ohio to further develop this conspiracy. Lincoln was aware of his return but didn't want to take any more public action against Vallandigham, instead opting to keep him under close watch. The conspiracy fell apart and the Civil War ended soon after in 1865, and Clement Vallandigham then returned to practicing law, which is when his most spectacular story unfolded. In 1871, Ohio man Thomas McGeehan was on trial for the murder of Tom Myers. The two had gotten into a fight in a bar when Myers was shot and killed with his own pistol. Vallandigham was McGeehan's lawyer, and his defense was that McGeehan had not shot Myers, rather Myers had attempted to draw his gun during the fight and accidentally shot himself when it snagged on his coat. To prove this, Vallandigham reportedly kept two pistols, an unloaded one that he intended to present to the court, and a loaded one which he took out to the countryside in between court dates to test fire at a piece of cloth and analyse the gunpowder residue at different distances. When he returned to court, he had apparently gotten the two guns mixed up, bringing the still loaded revolver instead of the unloaded one. Now, I don't know much about guns or safety, or indeed gun safety, but I don't think you're supposed to just be satisfied with the mere belief a gun is empty. I think you're really supposed to check. Vallandigham obviously did not check, because when he performed the reenactment of his version of events and drew his gun as he claimed Myers had done, a loud bang was heard in the courtroom, followed by Vallandigham exclaiming, "My God! I've shot myself." Good job, genius. Clement Vallandigham died of his injuries the next day at the age of 50. With his death, he had provided a bulletproof defense of his client. Metaphorically speaking, of course. I mean, how can you argue against that? Thomas McGeehan was acquitted, although he himself was shot to death only 4 years later, so he actually probably would have been better off in prison, in a strange twist of irony. So here we have a lawyer who got his client acquitted by literally shooting himself, and he still somehow doesn't really sound like the sort of fella you'd want defending you. On one hand, it sounds like he was very wily in a sort of weaselly way, which I guess is something you'd want from your lawyer, I don't know. But he was also prone to doing stupid things from the sounds of it, and history obviously hasn't been too sympathetic with his viewpoints. I mean, I'm not an American and have only a glancing knowledge of American history, but I'm fairly sure Abraham Lincoln and the abolition of slavery are generally regarded pretty favourably. I mean, he did kill all those vampires. Anyways, if you liked this video, I have many more for you to also like the one about the lawyer who got into a fist fight with a judge, and you can subscribe to see more in the future. Until next time, stay safe.
Away down south in the land of traitors, rattlesnakes and alligators, right away, come away, right away, come away. Where cotton's king and men are chattels, Union boys will win the battles, right away, come away, right away, come away. They will all go down to Dixie